Yorana, bienvenue dans cette Inside the Doc à la rencontre du film MYTHS and Maidens, sélectionné en catégorie en compétition pour le FIFO 2025. Le film a été produit en 2024 à Aotearoa, il dure 58 minutes et nous rencontrons aujourd'hui Lisa TAOUMA, sa réalisatrice. Yorana, Lisa.
Yorana!
First question is, was there a specific moment that sparked your decision to start this project?
I really wanted to make the documentary because I'd interviewed many women across the Pacific region as a journalist, and I was really aware of many stories of different Pacific women across the whole of the Moana that just never got told and never got the chance to come together in one conversation. So that's really why I wanted to make it, to bring together all the amazing women that I've seen and listened to over the years, but to have it all come together in one particular conversation and to look at the different issues across the region that all connect.
And as you mentioned, the documentary is structured by different interviews. Was it challenging to edit or write the narrative of the full documentary with all of those points of view? On a un souci là. Lisa, can you hear me?
Resource.
Oh, wow.
To try to put everything in. And there were so many amazing stories. It was really hard to decide what to leave out because we get so few resources, we get so few funding opportunities to look at audiences like this. So it was really important to me to make something, not just to put a film about our issues on screen, but to be able to address a Pacifique female audience, because I wanted to create the value of that audience as well. So it was very hard because I wanted to, when you get one little thing, you want to put everything in it. And, because we don't get these opportunities very often. So yeah, it was very hard deciding, what to leave out because there's so many things, and so many amazing women, that were in it. So yeah, it was difficult to decide what not to put in.
I'll have to ask you the question again because we had some major lag on our side. So I'm so sorry about that. It was very interesting and well put. So sorry about that. The documentary is structured by different interviews. Was it challenging to edit or write the narrative of the full film?
It was very, very challenging to edit because we get so few opportunities and we get so few funding opportunities. And so when we get one, we try to put everything in. As many, documentary makers from Tahiti and everywhere will know, it's a challenge when you get one thing and then you think, this is our one chance, and you try to put as many voices in as possible. And it's very hard to decide what to leave out because I really wanted to honor the stories of all the different women on all the islands, Hawaii, the woman in Melanesia, and so we only had a short time and, very, very small budget. So it was very hard. But I'm so happy that I got to put the women that are in it.
You interviewed in both French-speaking and English-speaking countries of the Pacific. Do you feel that the point of views of the protagonist in the film on that specific topic differ based on their locations?
Yes, so I think what's interesting when you put a landscape of different Pacific women on different regions together, what becomes apparent are the different issues according to who colonized those regions. So, for example, the women in the regions colonized by America, so Hawaii, specifically, are quite different to the issues in French Polynesia and Eastern Polynesia. And Eastern Polynesia, as we look at in the film, is very different to Melanesia. So that contrast is very interesting. That says a lot of things about the ways we've been taught by society to see women from different regions. So, for example, women in Tahiti and in the Cook Islands and in Hawaii have been hypersexualized. Like the common perception is a very, very, still to this day, a very, very hypersexualized image that's put forward in a lot of advertising and a lot of tourism, and it's a very specific image, as opposed to women in Melanesia who are often invisibilized, from those same sorts of narratives, and they're not positioned in the same way in advertising because they may not fit into the colonial idea of the beauty required to sell that island. So often it's the way women in different regions are positioned have problems, their own. It's very problematic in each region, but they're very, very different types of problems.
So the topic of the film is focused on the fantasy that Occidental culture, especially Occidental men, has built around the Pacifica woman, and more specifically the Polynesian woman. As a Polynesian woman yourself, can you relate?
Yeah, I grew up in Samoa in the 1970s, and I wrote a university thesis about it. I wrote my master's thesis about it because, like many women who grew up in that era, peak time of dusky maidens in the islands, my experience was we were sort of groomed from a young age to be in certain spaces. And when I was growing up in Samoa in the 1970s, the biggest dream you could have was to either marry a white pilot or to be in a beauty pageant, to be in the Miss Samoa. That was like the common aspiration for young girls who were light-skinned and were shaped in that way. And I was very interested in that as I got older. And dance groups, I was in lots of dance groups and tourist groups. And the thing that really made me think about it myself was when I was a teenager, I cut off my hair because I wanted to look like Princess Di, and I got kicked out of the dance group and put in the back row, and then not because that wasn't an acceptable look, So I just started thinking about these things when I was quite young from my experience, growing up in Samoa, but not in a very deep way. But then as a journalist, when I started looking at different issues that impact women around the region, and really a lot of it came from Samoa, because that's my experience and that's where my community is. And colorism in our own communities is very, very prevalent in Samoa, with darker skin cultures, because in Samoa there's a lot of Melanesian indentured laborers that were brought there. We have a big Melanesian population because the Germans brought lots of Melanesians to work on the plantations. And, I really saw and experienced a lot of the racism against, different women of color, because that's the way that our society had been structured and taught, through different colonial mechanisms over the years. But yeah, that was my first, I suppose, early experience of the way that Pacific women are looked at and the way that we're expected to behave, and the way that we're conditioned to be, depending on what you look like.
So I feel like that the documentary has been on the back of your head for quite a while. On a more concrete type of action, when did it start really?
Well, it started 4 years ago, but then COVID happened. So, and because we didn't have a very big budget, I just tried to film little bits, along the way. And because I just really wanted to show, because we don't often, it's interesting, we don't often see a lot of women from the other side of the Pacific. Like in Tahiti, I'm sure there's not a lot of people that know about women from the Solomon Islands, or, you know, in Samoa, we don't know a lot about women from Hawaii, you know, and I really wanted us all to be able to see each other's issues and the similarities and the differences. So yeah, it's a topic that's been on my mind for a while, but I thought it was the right time now to put that conversation out to the world, because there's more and more Pacific women that are now audiences and, you know, going to lots of films. And I think this type of topic, especially with social media and TikTok and Instagram, I'm seeing a lot of young women talking about these issues. So I felt like it was the right time.
You mentioned the funding, which is always a very big aspect of filmmaking. Have you faced any particular challenges during the filming process? And how did you select the people or the location featured in the film?
Yeah, it was really hard because a lot of the communities that are impacted by things like racism in our communities and colorism, a lot of those communities, you know, those topics are so sensitive and communities are so vulnerable because they're living in it, you know. So it was really difficult because a lot of those women didn't feel like they could have the voice to articulate what these things are, you know, and because it opens them up to being very vulnerable to their own communities. You know, I'm sure every filmmaker that goes in and makes films about sensitive topics, that's one of the issues, is you know, these people then become vulnerable. And it's quite, you know, I was really sensitive to how different women would feel about articulating it. So, and I didn't want them to also get a lot of bad reaction from their communities, because they're quite vulnerable things to speak about, you know. So it was very difficult, and in a lot of ways, the most vulnerable women in this conversation weren't able to be the ones to articulate their issues. You know, so I was really grateful that other women felt like they could help to voice those things. But yeah, it's you know, we're small, sensitive communities, you know. As you know, our community groups are very insular and small in some of the smaller islands, especially. And you know, there was some big issues in the documentary I didn't end up putting in because I was worried about the harm that might come to some women, and yeah, it was quite sensitive trying to work out who could hold that space and who could voice those things.
In the different locations you have been to in order to film the film, do you feel that women are more free or less free in some communities, and which would be the ones?
Yeah, that was really interesting to me. Like, I thought that, for example, women in Hawaii, in a way, it was easier interviewing people when outside of the countries, because of the issue of, you know, being so worried and involved in your communities when you're in it. So, for example, so there's an amazing Hawaiian woman in it, Emalani Case, and I think it was easy for her to speak because she's living in Aotearoa now, and although, you know, she's very connected to Hawaii. But yeah, I think I found it easier to interview people who may have had some separation from their community, you know, who felt safer. So the woman, for example, there's a group called Hot Brown Honey in Australia, who are a big performance group, and they are because they live in Australia and they live in a Western country, they have a lot more freedoms of voice, you know, and so they're very politicized performers, and they're big performers, and so they're used to making big political performance statements. Therefore, it was much easier for them to speak about things very freely. In other communities, not so much. I think, I think the hardest was probably Samoa because, women living there, and we all know the judgment from our own communities and things.
Small
I think that was
communities.
yeah. And then you've got the layers of things like Christianity and in places like Hawaii and perhaps Tahiti, there's still lots of structures that make it hard maybe for women to speak out. I'm just thinking about some of the American colonial structures in Hawaii, and there's some things that just make it difficult for women to be in that space.
Thank you. When you traveled to those countries, did you collaborate with locals team to create the documentary?
Yes, and which is what I really love doing. And so our production company tries to do that all the time because we have amazing teams in the Pacific. Like we worked with a wonderful team in Tahiti, local crew, local fixers, local researchers. I really want to put out to the world, the film community in the world, that our island crews, we are so well facilitated with so much talent. It's really good for the economy and for everything to start working more with local, especially local fixers and local researchers, and people that can help get the right local talent, but also with crews. So we're really lucky because we have good relationships with crews in Samoa, in Tonga, in Hawaii, in Aotearoa, and in Australia, and they're all Pacific crews. Like our team in Sydney, we work with are all Polynesians, and in Hawaii, and so it creates an amazing ecosystem for all our Pacific creatives and technicians across the region, and everyone's at an amazing level. They're very technically proficient, but that way you also have a really good relationship with the people you're interviewing because they feel more comfortable because it's a local crew, and local crew have great local knowledge, about locations. And so that's the other wonderful, wonderful thing about making a piece like this is you get to have what we call the va, which is a Samoan word for the connecting space,
Mm-hmm.
with all of these people, not just the people on screen, but the people off screen.
The full team, yeah. So you don't working with locals. It's like working with the fixer, but with the technical aspects more, yeah. In your view, or maybe your hope, what is the social or cultural impact you expect from your documentary?
It's already been really, really rewarding for me. Like, I love showing this film on big screens with big groups of Pacific women because, I think as a filmmaker, like the biggest evidence of impact when you show something, and it's the golden rule, make if people laugh and if people cry. But I've had a really unexpectedly big response to it. And I think because it's just things that haven't been addressed. And I think the women in it are so truthful it's about truth and honesty on screen of these experiences. And so many women have been so brave in telling their truth about, things that have happened to them. And I think it's just connected with all these women who are watching it because they feel seen. And it's just one of those issues that connected right through the region. And that's what I love, and that's what I was hoping the impact would be. And we've had overwhelming feedback, wherever it's been screened, and it was screened recently in the Solomon Islands as well. So because I was interested in what the different communities would think. But that's all you can hope for, as and that's what I want, because we're not often addressed as an audience. And, you know, we had a big screening in Aotearoa, and a lot of women were really, they couldn't believe it was just for them. You know, like, that's what it's made for. It's made for Pacific women as an audience as well as on screen. And I love that we've been able to make that in that space.
Thank you. We reached the end of the interview. My last question is a little bit more general and maybe more industry focused. What advice would you give to an aspiring documentary filmmaker?
I think it's how you make your creative vision match the resource, and how you can work with someone to help you get the resource to make it. Because, you know, in the Pacific, we have so many creatives. We have so much talent. We have so much creative talent. We have so much talent on screen. And it's often not matched with pathways to be able to make these things happen. So my advice is to find a producer. It's how you find those pathways. Come and ask Laura at FIFO. What are some producers? You know, I think, you know, these festivals are really good in that way, and being able to match people with resources. We've had amazing networking opportunities at FIFO. We've been able to connect with really good markets, with, you know, funders, with young producers. We've been able to commission creative content for the Coconet from young Tahitian, Marquesian filmmakers. And I think it's actively engaging with all these places and trying to network to see who can help your vision come to life.
Thank you for those kind words toward our organization and our local talents as well. Thank you very much, Lisa, for your time. We really look forward to welcome you in Tahiti for the next FIFO. Lisa TAOUMA sera parmi nous au prochain FIFO pour accompagner la présentation de son film MYTHS and Maidens, un film d'Aotearoa sélectionné en compétition et à retrouver à la Maison de la Culture du 31 janvier au 9 février 2025. Maururu, Lisa.
Maururu.